Thank you. Good morning, Austin. Good morning. We're in Austin, right? So, what a great event. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm Tom Shack. I'm the Comptroller of Massachusetts. Obviously, I live a very exciting life. And you can just imagine that, that counting $6 billion every year and handling the issues surrounding 96,000 employees is pretty darn exciting. So for those of you that don't know, Massachusetts is in the northeast section of the United States. It is a Commonwealth. There are 4 Commonwealths in the United States, but we're one of them. So we don't refer to it as a state. We do refer to it as a Commonwealth. So if I say Commonwealth, that's why I'm saying Commonwealth. In any event, the fact of the matter is that we recognized in our office, when I became comptroller in 2015, it's been a very fast 3 years, that there's going to be a significant issue relative to our workforce. And the reason that we were able to determine this or to discover this was because we were able to do a lot of data analytics. And the truth of the matter is, many of you have heard of the silver tsunami that's coming, and certainly it's going to impact all industries. And that if you haven't, the silver tsunami is the spate of retirements that are going to happen over the course of the next 2-3 years, and then beyond. For us, we have an expectation that we'll lose up to 40% of our workforce over the course of the next 10 years. So from a services standpoint, that's a critical issue with 96,000 employees. And the fact of the matter is that we simply can't hire our way out of that. And there's a number of reasons for that. But the first issue that I think is really important for our Commonwealth and for our state government, and the great thing about my position is I get appointed by the governor, I take my oath, and then I work for nobody, right? I can't only be removed for cause, and this may be cause, but hopefully not. But I'm a lawyer too, so hopefully I know what cause is, and I'm going to try to obviously avoid that. But the fact of the matter is that and I do work for the people of the Commonwealth, of course. That's really who I work for, and that's why the partnership that we've developed in Massachusetts with folks like the team at Socrata, and I think I really don't do this a lot. I really don't talk a lot about the vendors that we interact with, but I can't not talk about our relationship with Socrata. And I want to say a special thank you for them inviting us to participate here today. The relationship has been enormously valuable in Massachusetts for us, and we're really looking forward to what the future has to hold, particularly as it relates to the Socrata platform. Now, that said, we have certain obligations, and one of the things that we do in state governments, or in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in particular, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, New York, we tend to be bureaucratic, right? A lot of the New England states in particular tend to be bureaucratic in our thought processes. So the question becomes, how can we as government leaders be entrepreneurial? In other words, if we were a business, how would we operate? Well, that's how I operate, or how I oversee the operations of the Commonwealth, and that's how we deal with 96,000 employees and $60 billion in accounting and audit every year. So the first thing that we have to do is define what an entrepreneur actually is. And in this case, it's a really simple definition, and one from Webster's, which is one who organizes, manages, and assumes the risks of a business enterprise. Well, why is it the governments aren't traditionally thought of as entrepreneurial environments? Because the fact of the matter is we fit into that just like everybody else who's actually an entrepreneur. And you can bring that entrepreneurial spirit to government. So the question then becomes, why is it that we don't more often bring entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial activity to state government? And the fact of the matter is that we don't keep pace. Government innovation doesn't keep pace with the private sector, but why? So the first thing is again, this is all our opinion, my opinion, but is risk aversion. We're not for profit, and profitability drives efficiency in the private sector. Doesn't mean you can't be entrepreneurial. Does mean we're not, we're more focused on other issues, and we'll get to those. The second thing is security, right? All of our states, all of our local governments, all our municipal governments, all of our government officials have, PII sensitive and protected information in their systems. So we have to, we have an obligation not only to our taxpayers, but also to our employees to make sure that we're focused on security. And that's always been, an issue that's a sideline, in, at least, again, speaking on behalf of our community. So the other thing is transparency. We have to be transparent to the taxpayers. It's very, very important. Again, that's that relationship that we've developed with Socrata and their team. And then resources. Obviously, in every governmental environment, resources are, scarce, and there's competing political needs. Now, fortunately, in Massachusetts, we don't have scarce resources, and we don't have competing political needs because we have all the money we will ever need, and we don't have any political strife whatsoever. So we're, and I think that's the secret to our success. The fact of the matter is I think I think if you were to put us on a list, of states and commonwealths, you would find that, not unlike everybody else, we also have, significant limitations and significant political strife relative to prioritizing things. Then finally, of course, is that dreaded word, right? Bureaucracy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but there's, and this isn't designed to pile on as it relates to government employees, but we have typically a lack of creativity and ownership, and it's not my job, right? The it's not my job attitude. When I first moved to Massachusetts with my wife back in the late 90s to go to law school, I was going to the RMV, the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and we had to get our licenses, right? From Maryland, moving up to Maryland, D.C. area, moving up to Massachusetts. Going to the RMV, of course, there's a line, and that line was about, 40 people deep. Do the math, 2 minutes to 2 minutes per person. And there was one person who was the greeter at the front desk, and she was delightful. And what I mean by that is, as I was watching, as I was standing in line, and it took us about probably 50, 60 minutes to get through this line just to the information desk. What is it you're doing today? Well, registrations, we're going to do the licenses and so forth. So we're the next in line, and I just, I noticed every time anybody came up to the kiosk, right? She was like this. Can everybody see that? I'm shaking my head no, for those of you who can't see. And the fact of the matter is that to me was not a good sign, right? Because the answer is going to be no. And so I walked up and I said, how are you? How's your day? What can I do for you, sir? Well, I did notice one thing, right? You were shaking your head no before we ever got here. Now, that's really not a good idea to do at the RMV, for those of you, but that understand what I'm talking about. Not a good idea, right? But I thought, what am I going to lose here? I mean, half the people are getting sent away to go get other things. I'm sure I'm not going to make it through this process in one day now, maybe not even two. But I decided, I'm just going to be honest, right? You're shaking your head no. I'm a little concerned because I think we have everything, and that message should be this, And, she just laughed, she just kind of smiled and laughed chuckled a little bit. And then I was ready for the hammer to drop. And I was ready to get back in our car, which wouldn't be registered in Massachusetts, and leave. But she just laughed, and she said, "You're all set," and pushed us through, gave us a ticket now to get, the number to get in line for the other 4 hours that we spent there. But the truth of the matter is that self-fulfilling prophecy, that bureaucracy, that lack of creativity and ownership, and that thought process of it's not my job is prevalent. It's pervasive in governments. And that's why, in Massachusetts, again, not speaking for anybody else, You have that experience where the media and public interest and other folks are critical of us, right? Described often as hacks. And trust me, we're going through a lot of different iterative processes in Massachusetts that have not been the most comfortable thing in the world, but they're good for us. They're good for us because we're moving the bar and we're advancing. So I think it's really, really important for people to recognize that you cannot say anymore, it's not my job, because in this era of technology, in this era of entrepreneurship, you had better learn very quickly as government officials that if you don't evolve, if you don't innovate, if you don't pivot, if you don't learn what those things mean, and if you don't know what those things mean, you probably shouldn't be here. I mean, honestly, because these are the things that the people of you or your constituencies or your clients or your customers, as we think of them in our office, will simply replace you. I don't mean like vote you out of office or, select somebody else. I mean, they replace you with technology, right? What do I need you for if you, Tom, the government official, if a system can do it for me, right? Well, a lot of people in the government will say, yeah, but this is my job. My job is to greet people at the RMV and to shake my head no and to challenge people. So the truth of the matter is we have to be a lot more creative and we have to shed that bureaucratic thought process. And then, of course, the other thing that we all have to deal with are the broad priorities and the social infrastructure and political issues for our particular constituencies and our represented areas. So our future, from our standpoint, is in the cloud for us. Now, the cloud's everything changes so fast now, right? So, I handed my iPhone 10 or X, as my 24-year-old daughter would call it, over to Scott this morning Scott Olson, our communications chief, this morning, and before I came out here, so it wouldn't ring and I wouldn't get that call from the governor, or the governor's staff while I'm actually saying all this stuff live. So Scott has it, but the point is this: that's a supercomputer. Compare it to go back 30 years, go back 40 years. Think of the warehouse full of one system, right? One big CPU. All the tapes and the cards, the punch cards, and all those other things. Think of just how fast we've gotten to where we are now from a technology standpoint. And that's what we have to be thinking about from a government perspective. And that starts with our procurement and decision-making models. So the problem with our traditional processes, particularly as it relates to system development and implementing new systems, particularly, again, in the Commonwealth, it's like Baskin Robbins, right? 31 flavors. So those 31 flavors, you sit down at this table, and what happens is you get 30 people from all these different state agencies. And why do we have so many people at this procurement table? The short answer is because of risk, right? Nobody wants to be the person who, creates the failure that ends up on the front page of the Boston Globe, right? And just you can simply put in your paper at the end of that, because nobody wants to have that happen, right? We don't want to do it. We don't want it to happen. We don't want our constituencies to happen, for it to happen within our constituencies. So we have to we have to spread that risk around. The bureaucratic decisions based on perceived needs or preferences, again, our historical vendors, technology vendors, are really, really happy to walk in our door and to say to us, what do you want, right? What do you want to do? And those 30 people around the table say, well, I want chocolate ice cream, I want chocolate chip, I want mint, I'm not going to go through the other 28 flavors. Don't worry. But that's really our model, our procurement model. And cost is often not the biggest factor in state government, which is remarkable to me, because these things that I'm talking about in the private sector, and I come from the private sector, And I've been in state government for a period of, about 15 years now, but I still, I teach entrepreneurship and legal programs, and I do quite a bit of discussion about how we can be more innovative and entrepreneurial. But cost is, not really a factor. That factor that I just described, the risk factor of showing up on or of winding up above the fold on the front page, is the risk factor that most people, is going through most people's minds. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to wind up on the globe. This is going to be a disaster. There are going to be sunk costs, sometimes in the hundreds of millions of dollars, in just one state. So those, and that's a dreaded concept. So the use of cloud and SaaS forces our bureaucracy to curb its appetite for customization, reduces cost geometrically, and focuses on core needs. In other words, we get one flavor, and that's vanilla. And for a minute, people say, well, wait a minute, I may not want vanilla. Well, that's too bad. And the reason I say it's too bad is because this is the business model of the future for technology. And really, really innovative companies, and I certainly include Socrata in that, in that group, really innovative companies understand that if you build it right at the outset, you'll be able to, that your users will be able to curb their needs into your system. That's exactly what we did with our CTHRU system, which is our transparency mechanism in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that one flavor, right, we curb everything and say, okay, what are our data points? What are we able to do? How scalable is it? What's the accessibility? In our case, if you go to macomptroller.org/CTHRU, actually, Scott and Chris Guido, our Deputy Comptroller and Chief Information Officer, will tell you that, you actually only have to go to macomptroller.org. And on macomptroller.org, you'll find a transparency button. One click, you'll see all of the state's transparency work in progress, right? We're not done. We're never done. With expanding that transparency. But the great thing is that today you can use your supercomputer, your smartphone, and you can go onto those websites and you can parse the data and you can go through everything that we have from a non-secure availability standpoint. And I'm really pleased to announce that just before we came down to this event, and I was so happy to be here to share the fact that in less than 2 years, really just over 18 months, we had on our website 1.5 million page views, right? 1.5 million page views. Now, for Google, that's a half a second, right? Or even less. But for a state government transparency site, our previous site wasn't even accessible. It was a highly customized tank of a system that was totally legacy. And then it went live in 2010. And by 2011, or the end of 2011, you could no longer access it, right? It wasn't accessible by 95% or more of the computers in the world. And believe it or not, in the sophisticated technology environment of Massachusetts. So the reason is because Microsoft had updated Internet Explorer, and our system was no longer compatible. So the transparency system of Massachusetts was not accessible if you had Internet Explorer. You had to download Chrome or Firefox, any of these other browsers. And that was resulting in a very significant issue for our team. And the reason is because we get the calls. We're the financial people. We get our help desk, which Scott overseas. Those poor folks were dealing with this is a transparency system. You guys are transparent. And when we started to get those calls, we said, well, what can we do about it? I challenged Chris and his team at a deputy in our team of deputy comptrollers. And I said, look, do this quickly. Let's figure out what an option is. And let's get it done. Well, 2 days less than 7 months later, we went live. And CTHRU was immediately recognized as a huge bridge filler in Massachusetts to bring us together with media, bring us together with the folks in public interest, and of course, our core constituency. So that's why I say 1.5 million page views on state data or Commonwealth data is a remarkable thing if you consider that it was 0 before we went live, right? Because, for the most part, you couldn't access it. So we're very, very proud of that. So this is our traditional procurement model, right? And it's really not for dramatic purposes only. I do use it. It's actually not, but it's really appropriate. We have all of these, decision trees for procurements, and I'm sure this is recognizable to a lot of folks. But this is what those procurement teams do. This is what the 30 people engage in. This is why it takes 5 years, to actually make a decision. And then it takes another 5 years to implement. And if you're using a customized service or a customized system, which, no offense to the traditional vendors, they love, because, it's like, open checkbook in Massachusetts means more than just transparency, right? So this process requires, a lot of sophistication. It discounts a lot of folks who have great innovative ideas, right? Smaller companies are disadvantaged. Those companies that are really, really on the leading edge of some incredible technology advancement, to have to go through this, well, fortunately we have MIT. So it would be helpful for you to have some sort of postgraduate degree from MIT if you want to go through this and understand it. So what we did is we developed a new model, and that is, go, no go, or sorry, ideation, and I apologize, these are off a little bit, but ideation, a needs analysis, we ID the vendors, we do test and security, and demo, or cost test and security, demo to users, and a go, no go. So that's really, really important to us. And it's really important to us on a number of different levels, because this is not rocket surgery, right? This is not something that, we created. No, we adapted and adopted this, adapted to and adopted it. This is just a lean startup model, simple. If you haven't read the Lean Startup, you probably should. It's a really great opportunity to understand how entrepreneurial ventures think today, and not in the 1980s when I went to business school. So since 2015, we've engaged in a number of these different improvements, not the least of which is the comprehensive annual financial report and the statutory basis financial report. We're working with Workiva on that. That's a cloud solution. Internal control questionnaire, obviously CTHRU, as I just described to you, with Socrata, and a new procurement right now. So these have all been advancing with us, right? We started with a simple cloud solution to create collaborative effort amongst our audit team. Then we went to the internal control questionnaire. That was a really great process. When I was a COO and a CFO of a state agency prior to joining the Comptroller staff, I used to have to fill out the internal control questionnaire, and we have something called Department Head Signatory Authority, right? So that means, as the CFO and COO, the district attorney that I worked for, who's elected, had to delegate to me certain responsibilities, and that was one of them was making sure that we had proper internal controls pursuant to the Comptroller's instruction. And there's 151 departments and agencies in Massachusetts that have to follow our instruction and our policies. Our policies are this thick, right? 2 binders. They're still, I still keep them on the credenza in my office since becoming comptroller. And the reason is I want to be reminded every day that that's bureaucracy, that that's the bureaucratic process. And the internal control questionnaire was one of those things. You have to fill out 125 different questions. And if you're not a sophisticated user, as Cy Sims used to say about suits, picking out suits and clothing, if you're not a sophisticated customer, then you're in a situation where you fill out, you say, instead of yes, you say no to something. Well, desk audit, right? So happened in my first internal control questionnaire, my first year as a CFO. I said, I filled out this questionnaire, and they said, did you order any IT equipment? I was like, yeah, we ordered some computers. And at the end of the year, when did they arrive? At the end of the fiscal year, so this is end of June. When did they arrive? July 2nd, right? $25,000 worth of computers. Okay, so the desk audit resulted in that $25,000 being taken out of the new budget, FY05, and then credited back to the '04 budget, right? And those of you that understand the end of the fiscal year, a lot of times you wait to buy needed things that you absolutely really should have, but you got to make sure you have the money for it. So this is one of those situations where that's exactly what happened with us. We ended up in a situation where they took that money away from our next fiscal year and put it back, and gave it back to the Treasury for the previous year. And those of you that are in the financial and tech world understand exactly what I'm talking about. That means that we were now short in next year because we didn't get those computers by June 30th. It's an accounting standard, I get it, right? It is an accounting standard. But the fact of the matter is that, that's, to me, that's stifling the ability to be able to advance and to create. Now, we make it very clear to folks now that, and when this new updated internal control process, we make it very clear to people what they need to do and when. But the key lesson there, the key life lesson for me was, whatever you do, don't fill out those questions with, completely honest answers, right? Yeah, I'll say it. I mean, did you order anything that came in the next fiscal year? No. Right? I mean, it's, and trust me, the DA that I work for, fantastic, brilliant DA. But let's just say that that experience was like being the asbestos wrapper around an old coal furnace. It's cool on this side, but up here, not so cool. So the fact is that that's one of the life lessons that I brought into the Comptroller's office. And so now we have thoughtful questions that don't ask things that are not really appropriate. And we focus much more on whether or not people are actually meeting their mission. I mean, that's really our job. That's who we really work for, is the 151 departments and agencies. So it is it's an enormously important thing. So as I said, I'll have vanilla, please. The unanticipated benefits for us were phenomenal. Not only was it selfish, did we want to cut down, this is with regard to CTHRU, not only do we want to cut down on those requests for people coming in saying, one, I can't access the data. Two, that means that you, Comptroller, have to provide it to me through a public records request. That's not good, right? Because that requires us to do more work. And then there were, and so what happened is we learned that the unanticipated benefits were geometric also. So a system that cost us pennies compared to the customized, behemoth that we had before that was not transparent. We now had the ability to be able to say to all agencies and departments, hey, just send people to the site if they're asking for data or information. And if they do, then you're all set. And so that cut down enormously on that. The next thing that happened was, obviously our budget and finance staff utilize it on a daily basis, so they don't have to use these arcane report writing functions in some of the systems. Security is not as big a factor for us because no PIR sensitive data ever makes it into the system. So we're not, security is not as important. And of course, the non-traditional procurement model is now often subscription-based. That's how I'm a former publisher. I'm a former newsletter publisher from the 1990s. I think of things in the subscription world. If I could, Volvo has just come out with a subscription for a car. That's awesome, right? I just subscribe to it, and when I don't want it anymore, I drive it back to Volvo and say, I don't want this anymore. Now, maybe a little more complicated than that. We also have more eyes on our data, and I was really, really honored that they put up, that Socrata put up a quote outside of this event. But, and I'd said in the Boston Globe, instead of having 600 pairs of eyes on the data, I have 6 million pairs of eyes to help us find fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's really the truth. Our objective is to make sure things happen, and they happen in an appropriate way, and that we're supporting our folks. And then finally, our data is truly deep diveable. Our speed to go live, as I said, was weeks and months, not years, and our costs were geometrically lower. So I'm out of time. I'm now 4 seconds over. So I'm gonna stop with that, but I do want to say one last thing. Innovocracy, right? So if you're in the government and you're engaging in innovation, don't let bureaucracy screw that up, okay? Utilize your opportunities in a way that will allow you to be innovative, but get rid of that, shed that bureaucratic mindset, shed that artificial framework, and you will ultimately be successful. I welcome the opportunity to work with anyone on these issues. Feel free to go to our website, reach out to me. Always happy to communicate and share what we're doing, and that's our presentation for today. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your program.